think one of the things that we as the workers' movement could really do with right now is a new model Marxist state. If you look at after the revolution of 1917, the October Revolution in Russia, when the United Soviet Socialist republics were proclaimed, with Lenin and the Bolshevik Party as their leaders, it inspired millions of people around the world to not only come and visit the Soviet Union to see what they were doing, um, but basically many people said, yes, this is the way we should do things. People moved from being syndicalists or trade unionists to full-blown Marxists from the inspiration and the examples set by Lenin and the Bolshevik Party in Russia. Um, I'm talking in the early days here, say from 1917 to 1927 and beyond. People saw this as a real kind of beacon of hope. Um, if you want to read a good book about its effects on the workers' movement, I recommend a book called Those Stormy Years. I can't remember who it's by. I'll try and post a link on here, but it's a really good book. It's about a guy who started off in the trade union movement at the turn of the last century and witnessed all of Soviet Union's birth and China and all that. So, because the image ingrained of in most people's minds about Marxism is Stalin or Mao, we need something new to say. Actually, this is how we want to do this in the 21st century. Um, there aren't many kind of new socialist states. I wouldn't consider Hugo Chavez's Venezuela to be a Marxist state. Chavez is not a Marxist, but he's not an anti-Marxist. He's also in very ill health, so things might well take a turn for the worse over there. Nepal has potential. Nobody wants to seize power and take over, but their political process is in a bit of a mess. I mean, they're not sorting shit out basically. So they need to work, but they have potential to be able to provide such a model socialist state, but they have to work towards it. I mean, the thing is, I don't know how many kind of trained politicians or economists or necessary people with the job they have amongst their ranks, but I'm sure they have some. I've heard a lot of interviews and they seem quite wise. So, what sort of qualities should this new model socialist state have? Probably one of the biggest indicators in the eyes of the ordinary person as to how free a country is, or is press freedom. So, this country must have guaranteed freedom of press, freedom of assembly, which is the right to protest or have demonstrations. Um, it should provide everyone's basic needs: food, shelter, water, medical care, decent education should be available for all. Possibly minimal spending on the military, or perhaps a move towards having organised people's militias instead. But just kind of the bare bones necessary to defend the country, and if it has coasts, coast guards to basically defend its coasts, to guard its coast. It should have a democratic process in all areas of life, including, if possible, education, workers' self-management, which is, I believe they had that to an extent in Yugoslavia, and I think it worked pretty damn well. Yugoslavia was a market socialist country. The living standard was said to be, when things were good, comparable to that of Western Europe. Now, of course, in the long run, I am opposed to any kind of market socialism, but as an intermediary step on the way to building full socialism, I think it's acceptable to use it. I think Lenin, in his new economic policy, viewed the step of market socialism as just an intermediary phase with which the country could build up its strength so it could move towards a full socialism. How he would have finished off the job is unknown because, of course, he died and was replaced with Stalin, who took it in a different direction. So, we'll never really know how that turned out. But I think market socialism is as a stepping stone towards full socialism, full public ownership and control. And that's the important thing: control of the means of production, the ability for the workplace to be handled democratically, for workers to have decision-making powers collectively would be an important step. And if you can make this work, again, you'll have internationally. It should have peaceful foreign relations across the board, purely on the basis that you don't want to make any enemies and get sanctions all over you. That does not help anybody. So, what other kind of states could be candidates for this? China, there's always a possibility that China could go back towards socialism. It has what it's currently called socialism with Chinese characteristics, but it's not very Marxist. A lot of people live in bad conditions in China and don't have many rights that they did used to have under Chairman Mao, I think, but rights that they have no longer. But there is a possibility of a form of political revolution there. North Korea is an unlikely candidate. North Korea, its economy is still in a very bad way. It's not a Marxist country anymore, I would say. There's too much focus on the army. It's kind of, the Yuche system is a great idea, but it doesn't really work in a country like North Korea, just due to the amount of arable land it's got, which isn't very much, the natural resources that are available to it, which aren't many. It's dependent on China to keep it alive. Vietnam could potentially change its way, and of course Cuba. But still, I'm not a massive Castroite, but I feel Cuba is a reasonably good example of a socialist state. There are areas which it needs improvement on, but developing a country is about constant improvements, constant fine tuning and things. So, but again, they've got good healthcare. Everyone's got access to education. I don't think anyone's starving to death. No one's driving around in Mercedes, but it's a socialist state. That's kind of what it's about. But again, it could do with more press freedom and workers' self-management. You can't have too much of that. So another of potential case is Greece, which there's always a possibility that Greece might undergo some kind of a socialist revolution due to the effects of the EU collapsing and the recession and all the bad shit that's been thrown the Greeks way. I think there's definitely a lot of people down there that are in a very revolutionary kind of mood. So to round off, what the workers' movement really needs to galvanise it and send it in the correct direction is a new model socialist state, a new place that we can say, this is what we're building for, something that we can rally around. And I think that would have a great unifying effect across the whole workers' movement towards a lot of people. And it has to be different from the Soviet Union, it has to be different from the People's Republic of China or North Korea. It has to be a new type of place for a new era which we live in, which is the 21st century. And something that can show us the way forward, a place where new ideas can be tested. So, yeah, thanks for listening.